The first day she walked into the hall, she could feel the eyes on her. Not the welcoming kind of eyes, but the kind that looked past her, judging her before they even knew her. The new student had always been quiet, someone who preferred to observe rather than speak. She carried a small bag over her shoulder and walked slowly, as if trying to make herself smaller, hoping to disappear in the sea of loud voices and laughter. Everyone else seemed so confident, laughing and chatting like they owned the place, while she felt like an invisible shadow moving between the tables. The moment she sat down, a few whispers began. They were soft at first, almost like a breeze passing by, but the tone was unmistakable. There were smiles and little glances shared among the group she had hoped to blend into. She could feel it even if she didn't want to. She tried to focus on her notebook, pretending she was too absorbed to notice, but it was impossible to ignore the hum of quiet mockery around her. Every small gesture she made, every quiet cough, every movement of her hand seemed to invite scrutiny. The laughter, though subtle at first, began to grow louder, almost like a wave ready to crash. During lunch, she found a small corner by the window, away from the others. She opened her bag and pulled out her lunch, trying to focus on the familiar routines that always gave her comfort. She could hear the chatter, the jokes, the laughter, and occasionally, she caught a phrase or a snicker that was meant for her. It made her stomach twist, but she told herself it didn't matter. She had learned to survive these moments before. She had survived the first day at so many places, and she could survive this too. The people around her seemed to notice her shyness immediately. They whispered about her clothes, the way she walked, the way she spoke. One of them even mimicked her quiet voice when she asked a question, turning it into something funny that made the others laugh even more. She could feel her cheeks burn, her stomach tightening. For a moment, she wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor and never be seen again. But she didn't. She sat there, silently taking it all in, letting the waves of mockery wash over her without giving them the satisfaction of a visible reaction. Later in the day, she walked into the music room. This was her safe place, the one place she could breathe. She had always loved music. It was her escape, the place where words failed but emotions spoke louder than any voice ever could. As she opened her bag and carefully took out her instrument, she felt a small spark of hope. Maybe here, among the instruments and notes, she could find a place where no one's judgment mattered. She sat up quietly in the corner, careful not to draw attention, and started to play a few soft scales, letting the sound fill the space. It wasn't long before a few of the other students noticed. They were curious at first, and then the whispers began again. Some of them laughed, trying to make fun of the slow, careful way she held her instrument. She could feel the tension, the stares, the sense that they were waiting for her to fail, waiting for a reason to laugh. She didn't look up. She kept her eyes on the instrument, on the notes she knew by heart, and let her fingers move. The music was quiet, simple, not impressive by their standards, but it was hers, and it kept her grounded. The mockery continued, growing more daring as the minutes passed. Someone tried to touch her instrument jokingly, asking if she even knew how to play. Another commented on her posture, her fingers, her breathing. She could feel the heat of embarrassment rising, but she didn't stop. She kept playing, focusing on every note, every sound, every vibration that connected her to something greater than the cruel whispers. With each note, she reminded herself why she loved music. It wasn't for approval, it wasn't for praise. It was for the way it made her feel alive, the way it gave her strength when the world around her seemed to push her down. By the end of the day, she was tired, her fingers sore from holding the instrument so long, her mind exhausted from the constant awareness of judgment. But there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she hadn't let anyone break her spirit. She packed her bag slowly, making sure every part of her instrument was safely stored, and walked out of the room. The whispers followed her, of course, but she refused to give them any more power than they already had. She knew she couldn't control what others thought, but she could control her own determination. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. She walked slowly, her thoughts focused on tomorrow. She didn't know if it would be any easier, if the whispers and mockery would fade. But she knew one thing. She wouldn't let them define her. She would find her voice, her place, and one day, they would have to listen. She allowed herself a small smile, the first one in a long day, and continued walking, each step a quiet act of defiance. That night, she practiced in her room, alone but not lonely. She played the scales again, added a few small pieces she had been working on, letting the music carry her beyond the day's pain. Each note was a step forward, each chord a shield against the cruelty she faced. She thought about the people who mocked her, not with anger, but with a kind of sad understanding. They didn't know her, didn't see the strength that lived quietly inside her, and that was fine. One day they would see it, but that day was not today. In the quiet of her room, she made a promise to herself. She would continue no matter what. She would let her music speak when words failed, let her talent shine when doubt was loud, and let her courage grow even when the world tried to make her small. She didn't need anyone's approval to know her worth. She was enough, and one day, she would prove it in the most powerful way. Tomorrow would be another day, another challenge, another chance to be herself despite the laughter and whispers. And she would be ready. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of her practice linger in her mind. It was a quiet victory, but a victory nonetheless. She knew the journey ahead would not be easy, but she was ready to take the first steps, knowing that each small act of courage would lead her closer to the moment when everyone would finally hear her, really hear her, and be stunned by the truth they had ignored. As sleep finally took her, she held on to that thought, that hope, that small spark that no mockery could ever extinguish. The journey was just beginning, and though the world had mocked her presence today, she knew that the notes she carried in her heart would one day change everything. The next morning, she woke up with a heavy feeling in her chest. The memory of yesterday's whispers and laughter followed her, clinging to her thoughts like a shadow she could not shake. She had hoped that being quiet and staying in the background would keep her safe, but she realized quickly that hiding made her the target. Her stomach churned at the thought of going back, seeing the same faces, hearing the same laughter. And yet, she knew she couldn't stay away. She had to face them, even if it was just to survive another day. She got ready slowly, choosing her clothes with care. Nothing too flashy, nothing that would draw attention. She wanted to be invisible, but invisible in a way that still allowed her to breathe, still allowed her to exist. She packed her bag, checking her instrument one more time, making sure everything was in place. She held it close, the familiar weight comforting, as if it were a small shield against the world outside. Walking into the hall, she felt the same eyes on her again. This time, though, she tried to hold her head higher, even if just a little. The whispers started almost immediately. She could hear them this time, their voices soft but sharp, slicing through the air. Someone made a joke about her slow steps, another about the way she held her bag. It made her want to run, but she didn't. She took a deep breath and moved forward, each step a small act of courage. In class, she tried to focus. She wrote notes, answered questions quietly, and kept her eyes mostly on her work. But the mocking didn't stop. One of the students leaned over to their friend, making exaggerated gestures and repeating what she had just said. Another rolled their eyes at her efforts. She felt her confidence shaking, but she reminded herself that this was temporary. They didn't know her. They didn't know what she could do, and she would make them see. During a short break, she slipped out to the music room, the one place that felt safe. She was careful, making sure no one noticed her. As soon as the door closed behind her, she let herself breathe. She unpacked her instrument and began to play, softly at first, then louder as the music filled the empty room. It was her escape, her private world where judgment didn't exist. The notes carried her away from the sneers, the stares, the whispered mockery. She played for what felt like hours, though it was only a few minutes. Each note was a small defiance, each chord a reminder of her strength. She could feel the tension in her body slowly releasing. Music wasn't just a hobby for her. It was a lifeline, a way to survive the constant pressure of a world that didn't understand her. The more she played, the more she realized that this was the only place where she could truly be herself. When the other students finally arrived in the music room, some of them stopped to listen, curious despite themselves. A few smirked, clearly expecting her to make a mistake or to be awkward in front of an audience. But she didn't falter. She played the pieces she had been practicing for weeks, each note clear and confident. The sound surprised them, though they tried to hide it. She saw eyes widen in disbelief, heads tilt in curiosity, and mouths open slightly as if they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Her music had a power of its own, one that didn't need words to speak. After class, she walked out slowly, still feeling the weight of yesterday and today's whispers. She knew they were watching her, talking about her, and yet something inside had changed. She had faced them and continued on. She had not broken. She realized that the only opinion that truly mattered was her own. And her opinion was that she was capable, strong, and talented. That thought gave her a small, quiet smile, a secret victory no one could see. Over the next few days, she continued to face the same challenges. The whispers followed her, the laughs tried to unsettle her, and yet she remained steadfast. She began to practice even more, often staying after everyone else had left. She experimented with new pieces, refined old ones, and let the music carry her through moments of doubt and fear. Each practice was a small step toward proving herself, not to the others but to herself. She was learning to trust her own voice, to believe in her own abilities even when the world seemed determined to deny them. There were moments when she almost gave up. When a comment hit too close to home, when someone's mockery was particularly sharp, she felt the urge to disappear. But each time, she reminded herself of why she loved music, of the strength she had inside her, and of the quiet determination that had carried her this far. It wasn't easy, and she knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was learning to survive not just with her talent, but with her resilience. One afternoon, a small group of students gathered near the music room, watching her as she practiced. Some of them whispered to each other, clearly discussing her progress. She could feel their eyes on her, but instead of fear, she felt a strange sense of calm. She had grown used to their attention, learned to ignore the sharp edges of their words, and focused only on the music. It was a strange power, realizing that she could exist in her own world, unaffected by their judgment. She continued to play, each note stronger than the last, each piece more confident. She experimented with dynamics, with tempo, with expression, letting her emotions pour into every sound. She felt alive in a way she hadn't before, and even if no one else noticed, she knew that this was her moment, her space to grow. The music was no longer just a refuge. It was a way to show the world who she truly was, even if they didn't yet understand. By the end of the week, she felt a quiet transformation within herself. She wasn't just surviving the mockery anymore. She was growing because of it. Each comment, each whisper, each laugh that tried to push her down only made her more determined. She realized that talent was important, but courage and persistence mattered even more. The music had given her both the strength and the voice to face the world, and she knew that the moment of recognition was coming, even if it was still far off. That night, she sat in her room, her instrument on her lap, thinking about the week. She had faced mockery, doubt, and fear, and yet she was still standing. She had discovered a resilience she didn't know she possessed, and it filled her with a quiet pride. She played a few scales, letting the sound linger in the room, imagining the moment when she would finally be heard, when the music would speak louder than the whispers ever could. As she set her instrument down and prepared for bed, she promised herself that she would continue. She would practice harder, face the challenges with courage, and never let the world's judgment define her. The struggle was not over, but she had found a strength inside her that no one could take away. She closed her eyes, feeling a sense of determination stronger than ever before, ready to face the days ahead with her music as her shield and her voice. The day of the music showcase arrived, and the air was thick with excitement and nerves. Students gathered, instruments in hand, chatting and laughing, confident in their abilities. She entered quietly, her heart racing, her hands gripping her instrument tightly. For weeks, she had practiced, often alone, preparing for this very moment. Now, standing in the room filled with people who had once mocked her, she felt the familiar weight of doubt pressing down, but also a strange flicker of courage she had never felt before. The first few performers took the stage. Some were loud and confident, filling the room with music and commanding attention. The audience applauded, and the performers smiled, basking in the praise. She watched, her fingers tightening around her instrument. She had to wait her turn, which made her nerves even stronger. She could hear whispers behind her, some questioning if she could even play in front of everyone. The words stung, but they no longer had the power to break her. She reminded herself of all the hours she had spent practicing, all the quiet victories she had achieved in the empty music room. Finally, it was her turn. The room seemed to hold its breath as she walked to the stage. Every eye was on her, some filled with curiosity, some with doubt, and others with amusement. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The whispers and past mockery swirled around her mind, but she let them pass, focusing only on the music. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the instrument in her hands, the smoothness of the keys under her fingers, and the rhythm that had always lived inside her. The first note she played was soft, tentative, but it filled the space with a sound that was clear and pure. There was a pause, a moment where the room seemed to stop breathing. The note lingered, vibrating in the air, and she could see faces shift from skepticism to surprise. The laughter and mockery she had feared so much were gone, replaced by astonishment. She continued, each note stronger than the last, her confidence growing with every chord. The music flowed naturally, carrying her emotions, telling a story that words could never capture. As she played, she felt herself becoming part of the music, and the music becoming part of her. She didn't notice the audience's eyes any longer. She only felt the rhythm, the melody, the harmony of the piece. Every note was deliberate, every pause meaningful. She had never felt such a connection to her instrument before, and the joy it brought her was overwhelming. The people who had once mocked her were leaning forward, silent now, captivated by the sound. She saw the disbelief in their eyes, the awe that replaced their earlier amusement. Midway through the performance, she added her own flourishes, subtle changes that reflected her personality and feelings. The music became more expressive, richer, and more emotional. She felt the power of the room respond to her, the energy of the audience intertwining with the music she created. It was no longer about proving herself to anyone. It was about sharing a piece of herself with the world. And for the first time, she realized that her music could speak louder than any words, louder than any mocking laugh or whispered doubt. When she reached the final note, she let it linger, allowing the sound to fill every corner of the room. The silence that followed was electric. She opened her eyes slowly and saw the audience frozen, staring, as if they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first, then growing louder, more enthusiastic, more genuine. People who had laughed at her before were now clapping, some even standing, unable to contain their admiration. Her heart swelled with a mix of relief, pride, and joy. She had done it. She had turned their doubt into astonishment with the simplest thing she had, her music. After the performance, she stepped down from the stage, her hands still trembling slightly from adrenaline. She walked back to her seat, feeling a shift in the room. Conversations had changed. Whispers no longer carried mockery. Instead, they carried curiosity, admiration, and respect. Some of the students she had feared were watching her with newfound respect. She felt their eyes, but this time, she didn't shrink. She held her head high, realizing that she had earned their attention, not by changing herself, but by sharing her true talent. As the rest of the showcase continued, she watched other performers with a new perspective. She felt proud of them, happy for their moments in the spotlight, but she also knew that her own moment had arrived. She had discovered a strength she didn't know she possessed, a courage that had been growing quietly inside her for weeks. It wasn't just about music anymore. It was about believing in herself, trusting her instincts, and facing the world even when it seemed against her. After the event, a few students approached her, smiling awkwardly, complimenting her playing. She accepted the praise with a quiet smile, feeling a sense of validation she had never experienced before. It wasn't just the applause that mattered. It was the recognition that her dedication and passion had finally been seen. Even those who had mocked her were no longer laughing. Some avoided her gaze, realizing that their earlier behavior had been cruel, while others looked at her with a sense of respect she had longed for. That night, she sat in her room, her instrument on her lap, reliving every moment. She thought about the first note she had played, the silence that had followed, and the applause that had replaced it. She realized that all the mockery, all the doubt, had prepared her for this moment. Each challenge had been a stepping stone, each whisper a push toward proving herself. She smiled quietly, a sense of peace settling over her. She had faced the world and found her voice, not by changing herself, but by embracing who she truly was. The music still lingered in her mind, each note a reminder of the courage it had taken to perform. She thought about the students who had laughed at her, and she felt no anger, only understanding. They didn't know what she was capable of until now, and now they could see. She realized that their doubt had been a challenge she had to overcome, and she had done so with grace and strength. She set her instrument down carefully, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She knew the journey was not over. There would still be challenges, doubts, and moments of fear. But she also knew that she had discovered a part of herself that could not be shaken. She had faced mockery, conquered her nerves, and created something beautiful. The music had spoken for her when words could not, and it had been heard. As she prepared for bed, she thought about tomorrow, about the days ahead, and about the future. She felt ready for whatever came next. The first note had stunned everyone completely, but it had also awakened something within her. She had proven to herself that she could face the world and be true to who she was. That realization was more powerful than any applause, more lasting than any recognition. It was the moment she had been waiting for, and it had come through the music that had always been a part of her soul. She closed her eyes, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment and hope. The journey was only beginning, but for the first time, she knew that she had the strength to continue. She had faced doubt, mockery, and fear, and she had emerged stronger, more confident, and ready to let her music carry her wherever she wanted to go. The first note had not only stunned everyone in the room, it had stunned her too, showing her the power she had always held within herself. After the performance, the atmosphere around her changed completely. The whispers that had once carried mockery were now filled with curiosity and awe. She walked through the hallways with her instrument tucked under her arm, noticing how people looked at her differently. Some nodded respectfully, some smiled with genuine admiration, and a few even approached her to compliment her playing. It was a new feeling, strange yet welcome, and it made her heart beat a little faster with pride. She returned to the music room after the showcase, alone this time, and carefully unpacked her instrument. Sitting down, she let the silence embrace her. The music she played now had a different quality to it. It wasn't just about practicing scales or pieces anymore. It was about exploring her own expression, letting her emotions flow freely. She realized that performing in front of others had unlocked something inside her. The fear that had once gripped her was replaced by a quiet confidence that encouraged her to push her boundaries. Over the next few days, she noticed subtle changes in how the other students treated her. Those who had mocked her before now looked at her with a hint of respect. Some of the quieter students who had once kept their distance began to approach her, asking questions about her technique and the pieces she played. Even the most confident performers who had once dominated every practice seemed curious about her approach. She answered their questions politely, never boasting, letting her music speak for her rather than words. One afternoon, a small group of students gathered around her in the music room, clearly wanting to learn from her. They asked her to show a few techniques, and she patiently demonstrated, explaining each step clearly. She could see their admiration growing with each note she played. For the first time, she felt like a teacher, someone who could inspire others instead of being inspired. The thought filled her with a sense of responsibility and pride. She had come a long way from the quiet, unsure girl who had entered the hall just a few weeks ago. As she continued to practice and share her music, she noticed a change within herself as well. She was no longer consumed by the fear of judgment or ridicule. Instead, she focused on improving her skills, experimenting with new pieces, and expressing herself fully. Each day brought new challenges, but she met them with determination and calm. She realized that the strength she had gained from facing mockery had become an integral part of her, shaping her into someone resilient and confident. The teachers and instructors began to notice her progress too. They complimented her on her technique, her creativity, and her ability to convey emotion through her music. Some even asked her to perform in front of larger groups, recognizing her potential to inspire others. She accepted these opportunities with a quiet grace, always remembering how far she had come and how much effort had gone into reaching this point. She didn't take the praise lightly. She knew it was earned through persistence and dedication. Her peers continued to change as well. The students who had been skeptical or dismissive of her talent began to include her in group practices, inviting her ideas and respecting her opinions. She could see the shift in their attitudes, not forced or fake, but genuine acknowledgement of her abilities. It was a delicate balance, rebuilding relationships and trust, but she managed it with patience and kindness. She understood that respect had to be earned, not demanded, and she was determined to let her actions speak louder than words. One afternoon, while practicing a particularly challenging piece, she realized how much she had grown. Her fingers moved effortlessly over the keys, her expression full of concentration and emotion. The music flowed naturally, each note carrying a piece of her soul. She thought about the journey she had taken, from being mocked and overlooked to standing in front of an audience and astonishing them with her first tone. The memory of that moment filled her with a quiet joy and reaffirmed her belief in herself. She also began to notice the subtle ways she influenced others. The younger students, who had watched her from afar, started practicing more diligently, inspired by her dedication. The more confident students began experimenting with their own techniques, encouraged by the creativity and expression she brought to her performances. She saw the power of leading by example, of showing strength and resilience without needing to assert dominance or demand attention. As days turned into weeks, her reputation grew. She was no longer the quiet girl who had been mocked. She was a respected musician, someone whose presence commanded attention and admiration. Yet, she remained humble, never letting success change the person she was. She continued to practice diligently, always seeking improvement, always striving to express herself fully through her music. The journey was ongoing, and she embraced it with passion and commitment. The changes around her also brought a sense of fulfillment she hadn't anticipated. Friends who had once ignored her now sought her company, sharing their own challenges and victories. She found herself offering encouragement and guidance, drawing from the experiences she had faced. It was a reciprocal growth, a network of mutual respect and support that enriched her life in ways beyond music alone. She realized that overcoming mockery had not only strengthened her but had also allowed her to lift others up. There were still moments of doubt, of course. Sometimes, a fleeting comment or a skeptical glance would remind her of the past. But these moments no longer held power over her. She had developed an inner resilience, a quiet confidence that allowed her to continue moving forward. The challenges that once seemed insurmountable now appeared as opportunities to grow, to learn, and to express herself more fully. One evening, she sat alone in the music room, reflecting on the transformation that had taken place. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft echo of her practice notes. She thought about the first day, the whispers, and the mockery, and she smiled softly. Those moments, painful as they were, had shaped her into the person she had become. They had forced her to find strength, courage, and determination she hadn't known she possessed. And through it all, her music had remained a constant companion, guiding her, supporting her, and giving her a voice when words failed. She understood now that recognition and respect were not the ultimate goal. They were byproducts of the dedication and passion she poured into her craft. The real victory was in the growth she had achieved, in the resilience she had cultivated, and in the courage to be herself in a world that had once doubted her. Each note she played, each piece she mastered, was a testament to that journey. As she prepared to leave the room, she carefully packed her instrument and took a moment to glance around. The space that had once been a refuge from mockery had become a stage for growth, discovery, and transformation. She knew that the journey ahead would continue to have challenges, but she felt ready. She had discovered the strength within herself to face adversity, the courage to share her talent, and the ability to inspire others along the way. Walking out into the evening air, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The world that had once mocked her presence had begun to recognize her talent, but more importantly, she had recognized her own worth. She carried herself with quiet confidence, knowing that the transformation she had experienced was lasting, and that her journey of growth and expression had only just begun. Time passed, and she continued to grow, both as a musician and as a person. The girl who had once been mocked for her quiet presence now walked the halls with a calm confidence. She still preferred the corners and quiet spaces, not because she was shy, but because she had learned the power of observation. She watched, listened, and learned from the world around her, taking in lessons from every glance, every whisper, and every note played by those around her. She knew that growth didn't always come from applause. Often, it came from quiet perseverance and dedication. Her reputation as a musician spread beyond her school. Teachers began recommending her for local performances, and invitations to small gatherings and recitals became more frequent. Yet, despite the growing recognition, she remained humble. She focused not on the praise she received, but on the music itself, on the way it allowed her to express feelings she could not always put into words. Every time she held her instrument, she felt a connection to something greater, a channel for emotions, thoughts, and dreams that had once been locked inside her. At school, interactions with her peers continued to evolve. Those who had once mocked her began to approach her with genuine curiosity. They asked her questions about technique, about pieces she had practiced, about how she overcame nervousness and doubt. She answered patiently, sharing her insights without arrogance. The girl who had once been the object of ridicule was now a source of inspiration for many. Younger students, in particular, began to look up to her, eager to learn, eager to follow in her footsteps. Despite the growing admiration, she never forgot the early days. The mockery, the whispers, the feeling of being invisible. Those memories remained, not as scars, but as reminders of the strength she had developed. She often thought about how different her life might have been if she had given in to the fear, if she had let their words define her. But she hadn't. Instead, she had embraced her talent, trusted her dedication, and let her music become her voice. That voice had changed the way the world saw her, but more importantly, it had changed the way she saw herself. She began to take on new challenges, seeking opportunities that pushed her beyond her comfort zone. She joined ensembles, collaborated with other musicians, and explored different styles and techniques. Each challenge was met with a mix of excitement and determination. She knew that growth required effort, and she was willing to work hard. The girl who had once felt powerless in the face of mockery now carried a quiet strength, a resilience that allowed her to face even the most intimidating situations with grace. Her performances continued to captivate audiences. Each time she played, she poured her heart into the music, connecting with listeners in a way that transcended words. People who had once doubted her ability now watched in awe, often moved to tears by the beauty and emotion in her playing. It was a profound reminder that talent alone was not enough. It was the courage to share that talent, the vulnerability to expose one's heart, that truly left a mark on others. Outside of music, she noticed changes in her interactions with classmates and teachers. The relationships that had once been strained due to mockery were now defined by respect and mutual understanding. She found herself approached for advice, encouragement, and support, not just in music, but in life. She gave guidance freely, remembering the kindness of those who had once helped her through difficult moments. The quiet empathy she had cultivated became a source of strength, both for herself and for those around her. One evening, after a long day of practice, she sat in her room reflecting on her journey. She thought about the first day she had walked into the hall, the laughter that had followed her, and the feeling of being invisible. The contrast with her life now was stark. She had grown in ways she had never imagined possible. She realized that the journey had not been easy, but the challenges had forged her into someone resilient, confident, and self-aware. The obstacles she had faced were no longer burdens. They were proof of her perseverance and dedication. She picked up her instrument and began to play softly, letting the music fill the quiet room. Each note reminded her of the long hours of practice, the moments of doubt, and the small victories that had carried her forward. The sound was familiar, comforting, and empowering. She thought about the people who had mocked her, wondering if they could ever understand the depth of the transformation they had witnessed. But she didn't need their understanding. What mattered was that she had found her own voice, one that could never be silenced by ridicule or doubt. As she continued to play, she imagined the future. There were still challenges ahead, but she felt ready. She would continue to grow, to explore, and to share her music with the world. She knew that success was not measured by applause alone, but by the ability to remain true to oneself, to persevere through difficulties, and to find joy in the process of creating. Her journey had taught her that true strength came from within, and that the courage to be oneself was more powerful than any external validation. Her growth also inspired others. Students who had once doubted their own abilities began to follow her example. They saw that dedication, practice, and resilience could overcome fear and mockery. Her story became a quiet legend within the school, a reminder that talent paired with courage could change perceptions and transform lives. The impact she had on others was a source of pride, but she never let it make her complacent. She continued to challenge herself, always seeking new heights, new pieces to master, and new ways to express her artistry. One day, during a rehearsal, a teacher approached her with a proposal. They wanted her to lead a small performance for the school, highlighting her growth and the skill she had cultivated over the months. She accepted, not for recognition, but for the opportunity to share her music and inspire others. She prepared diligently, practicing every note, every passage, and every expression with care. The performance became more than a showcase of talent. It was a celebration of resilience, dedication, and self-belief. The day of the performance arrived, and she walked onto the stage with calm confidence. She looked out at the audience, seeing familiar faces, students, teachers, and friends who had witnessed her journey. She took a deep breath and began to play. The music flowed naturally, each note imbued with emotion and strength. The audience was captivated, drawn into the story she told through her instrument. When the final note resonated, the room erupted in applause, not just for her technical skill, but for the journey she had undertaken, the courage she had shown, and the inspiration she had become. After the performance, she received congratulations and praise from many people, but she focused on the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had remained true to herself. The recognition was meaningful, but it was the personal growth, the resilience, and the ability to face challenges with courage that mattered most. She had proven to herself that she could overcome obstacles, that her voice mattered, and that her talent could inspire others. That night, as she lay in bed, she reflected on the entire journey. From the first day of mockery to the performance that stunned everyone, she had grown in ways she had never imagined. She understood that life would continue to present challenges, doubts, and moments of fear, but she now possessed the tools to face them with grace, confidence, and determination. She had learned that true strength came from embracing oneself, cultivating talent, and persevering despite obstacles. She closed her eyes with a sense of peace and fulfillment, knowing that the journey was ongoing, but that she was ready for whatever came next. The girl who had once been mocked had become a symbol of resilience, courage, and inspiration. She had discovered the power of her own voice, and she knew that it would continue to guide her, challenge her, and uplift others. The first note that had stunned everyone completely had been the beginning of a lifelong journey, one defined by growth, self-discovery, and the unwavering belief in herself.